The moment my husband called me a pathetic excuse for a wife in front of his entire family, I felt my world shatter. But what destroyed him 3 days later was the 13-second video our daughter captured under the dinner table. A video that exposed a truth so ugly, even his own mother couldn't defend him. I'm about to show you how one recording changed everything. My name is Brielle, and I need to tell you about the night that changed my life forever. But before I get to that dinner from hell, you need to understand who I am and how I ended up sitting at a table while the man I married systematically destroyed me in front of people who were supposed to be family. I'm 38 years old, a mother to an incredible 12-year-old daughter named Isla, and until very recently, I was a wife to a man named Grant. Notice I said was. We'll get to that part. For the past 10 years, I've been living what I thought was a pretty normal life. I work part-time as a medical billing specialist at a clinic about 20 minutes from our house in the suburbs. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady, and it allows me to be there when Isla gets home from school. I handle all the insurance claims, patient billing, and administrative paperwork that keeps the clinic running smoothly. My coworkers are nice. My boss appreciates me. It's a good job, even if it doesn't come with prestige or a big paycheck. Grant, my husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, is 41 and works in corporate finance. He's a manager at a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of place where everyone wears expensive suits and talks about quarterly projections and market trends. He makes good money, the kind that afforded us a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood with good schools. From the outside, we probably looked like we had it all figured out. Our daughter, Isla, is the light of my life. She just turned 12 last month, and she's at that age where she's not quite a teenager, but definitely not a little kid anymore. She's smart as a whip, gets straight A's without much effort, and has this incredible sense of justice. Even as a little girl, she'd get upset when she saw other kids being treated unfairly on the playground. She's always been protective of people who are hurting, which is probably why she noticed what was happening to me long before I was ready to admit it to myself. Isla loves technology, always has. Give that girl a phone or a tablet, and she can figure out any app, any setting, any feature within minutes. She's the one who teaches me how to use new features on my phone, not the other way around. She's constantly recording little videos, taking photos, making TikToks with her friends. Her phone is basically an extension of her hand, which is pretty normal for kids her age, I guess. Then there's Grant's family, and this is where things get complicated. Grant's mother is Constance, and she's 67 years old. If you looked up judgmental upper-class mother-in-law in the dictionary, you'd find her picture. She's one of those women who prides herself on being a pillar of the community, volunteers at the hospital auxiliary, sits on the board of some historical society, hosts charity luncheons at her country club. Everything about Constance is polished and perfect and cold. Her house looks like something out of a magazine spread, all neutral colors and expensive furniture that you're afraid to actually sit on. From the very first time I met her, I could tell she didn't think I was good enough for her son. I didn't come from the right background. My parents were middle class, working people who did their best to give me and my sister a decent life. I didn't go to the right schools. I didn't have the right connections. And I certainly didn't have the kind of pedigree Constance had envisioned for Grant's wife. Grant's younger brother, Declan, is 38, just a few months younger than me, actually. He works in real estate and shares his mother's talent for making people feel small. He's married to a woman named Fiona, who's actually really sweet, but has learned to keep her head down and her mouth shut at family gatherings. I've seen the way Declan talks to her sometimes, and it reminds me uncomfortably of how Grant talks to me. These are the people who were sitting around that dinner table 3 weeks ago when my entire world came crashing down. These are the people who watched my husband eviscerate me and did nothing. These are the people who laughed. But here's what they didn't know. While they were busy enjoying the spectacle of Grant putting me in my place, my daughter Isla had her phone under the dinner table. Her fingers were steady as she pressed record, capturing every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every moment of my humiliation. She saw what was happening to her mother, and she decided to do something about it. At 12 years old, she showed more courage and clarity than I'd shown in years of marriage. That recording, just under 14 minutes of footage, became the grenade that blew up Grant's carefully constructed life. Because 3 days after that dinner, after I finally worked up the courage to watch what Isla had captured, I made a decision that changed everything. I stopped being silent. I stopped protecting Grant from the consequences of his own cruelty. I stopped caring more about keeping the peace than keeping my dignity. And when that video went public, when thousands of people saw exactly how my husband treated me, the fallout was swift and devastating. For him, for his family, for the image they'd worked so hard to maintain. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that recording mattered so much, why it became the catalyst for everything that followed, you need to understand how I got to that place. How a confident 26-year-old woman who thought she knew her worth became a 38-year-old who'd been convinced she had none. You need to understand that emotional abuse doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up one day and declare, "Hello, I'm here to slowly destroy your sense of self over the next decade." It creeps in gradually, disguised as jokes, framed as constructive criticism, justified as honesty or bluntness. You need to understand that I didn't wake up one morning and decide to accept terrible treatment. It happened so slowly, so incrementally, that I didn't realize I was being broken down piece by piece until there was almost nothing left of the woman I used to be. This is the story of how I lost myself in a marriage that looked perfect from the outside, but was rotting from the inside. This is the story of how a little girl's courage and a 13-minute recording gave me the strength to finally fight back. This is the story of how I stopped being a victim and started being a survivor. And it all started at a dinner party where my husband thought he could humiliate me with impunity, never suspecting that his own daughter was documenting every word for posterity. He thought he was teaching me a lesson that night. He thought he was putting me in my place once and for all, with his family there to witness and approve. What he actually did was hand me the evidence I needed to escape. He gave me proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't too sensitive, wasn't imagining the cruelty I'd been enduring. He gave me the truth, recorded and undeniable. And the truth, as it turns out, was the one thing his carefully constructed lies couldn't survive. So buckle up, because this story gets intense. There are moments that will make you angry, moments that might make you cry, moments that will hopefully make you think about the relationships in your own life and whether you're accepting treatment. You shouldn't. But most importantly, there are moments that will show you that it's never too late to find your voice. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to say, enough is enough. That dinner happened 3 months ago, but the story really begins much earlier. It begins with a young woman who fell in love with the wrong man for all the right reasons. It begins with a marriage that looked like a dream and slowly became a nightmare. It begins with me, Brielle, and the moment I stopped believing I deserved better. But it ends with me finally remembering that I did. I'm Brielle, And for the past 10 years, I believed I was building the perfect life with my husband, Grant. We met at a friend's barbecue back in the summer of 2013, and honestly, I wasn't even planning to go to that party. My sister Maeve had practically dragged me there, insisting I needed to get out more, meet new people, stop spending every weekend in my apartment binge-watching shows and eating takeout. I was 26 at the time, working full-time at the medical billing office, living in a small one-bedroom apartment, and pretty content with my simple life. I dated here and there, but nothing serious. I wasn't actively looking for a relationship, which is probably why Grant's pursuit felt so flattering. He spotted me within 10 minutes of my arrival at that barbecue. I was standing by the drink cooler, trying to figure out if I wanted a beer or a soda, when this confident, well-dressed guy walked up and introduced himself. Grant had this presence about him. Tall, clean-cut, with this smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was funny, charming, ambitious. He told me about his career in finance, his goals, his 5-year plan. He seemed so together, so certain about what he wanted from life. And what he wanted, apparently, was me. He called the next day, asked me to dinner, showed up at my door with flowers. For 3 months, he pursued me relentlessly. Romantic gestures, thoughtful texts, genuine interest in my life and my dreams. I felt like I'd won some kind of lottery. Here was this successful, attractive man who couldn't get enough of me, who made me feel special and valued and seen. We got engaged after 6 months. I know, that's fast. Everyone said so. Maeve pulled me aside at the engagement party and asked if I was sure, if I really knew him well enough. But I was swept up in the romance of it all, in the feeling of being chosen by someone like Grant. He had his life together. He had plans. And I was part of those plans. We got married in a small ceremony the following spring. Nothing too fancy. Grant said we should save money for a house instead of wasting it on one day. His mother, Constance, made it clear she would have preferred something more elaborate, more befitting her son's status. But Grant sided with me on that one. At the time, I thought it was sweet that he was being practical. Looking back, I wonder if he just didn't want to spend money celebrating me. 2 years into our marriage, Isla was born, and everything shifted. Grant had been supportive during my pregnancy, came to most of the appointments, helped set up the nursery, talked excitedly about being a dad. But after Isla arrived, I started to see cracks in the facade. He was frustrated by the crying, annoyed by the disruption to his sleep, resentful of how much time and attention a newborn required. He'd make comments like, "Can't you get her to stop crying?" Or, "Why is she up again? What are you doing wrong?" Like I had some kind of control over a baby's needs. When Isla was 6 months old, Grant got his first big promotion at work. More money, more responsibility, and significantly longer hours. That's when he suggested I cut back my hours at the clinic. "It would make things easier if you were home more," he said. "I need to focus on work, and it's hard to do that when I'm worried about daycare pickups and whether dinner is going to be ready." I agreed. Of course I agreed. It made logical sense, and I wanted to support his career. So I went from full-time to part-time, working 25 hours a week instead of 40. I told myself it was temporary, just until Isla was a little older, just until Grant settled into his new role. That was 7 years ago, and I never went back to full-time. The comments started around our 5th anniversary. Little jabs disguised as jokes. We'd be at dinner with friends, and someone would compliment my cooking, and Grant would laugh and say, "Well, she tries. Not everyone can be a chef, right?" Everyone would chuckle, and I'd force a smile, but inside something would twist, or we'd be getting ready to go out, and I'd put on a dress I liked, and Grant would look me up and down and say, "Are you sure you want to wear that? It's a little snug, don't you think?" The implication was clear. I'd gained weight, and he'd noticed, and I should be ashamed. When Isla started school, and other moms would talk about their careers or their hobbies or their accomplishments, Grant would jump in with, "Brielle keeps busy with the house and her little part-time job. It's enough for her." The way he said it made it sound like I wasn't capable of more, like I'd chosen the easy path instead of having sacrificed my career for his. I started trying to bring it up with him. "Grant, when you make jokes about my cooking in front of people, it hurts my feelings. It makes me feel like you don't appreciate the effort I put into making nice meals for us." He'd look at me like I was being ridiculous. "Brielle, you're way too sensitive. It's just humor. Everyone jokes around like that. If you can't handle some lighthearted teasing, that's your problem, not mine." So I tried harder to have a sense of humor about it. I laughed along with the jokes. I stopped mentioning when my feelings were hurt. I convinced myself that I was being too sensitive, that this was just normal marriage banter, that I needed to toughen up. But the comments kept coming, and they got sharper. "You know, my colleague's wife still looks like she did in college. She makes fitness a priority." Or, "I saw Sarah at the grocery store. She was telling me about her new promotion. Don't you ever think about doing more with your career?" Every comment was a paper cut. Individually, they seemed small, almost insignificant. But collectively, over years, they bled me dry. Grant's family made everything worse. His mother, Constance, had never warmed to me, never thought I was quite good enough for her precious son. Family dinners at her house were exercises in endurance. She'd ask pointed questions about my job, my background, my parenting choices, all framed as polite interest but dripping with judgment. "So, Brielle, still working part-time? Don't you worry about your resume gap? It's so hard for women to get back into the workforce after taking time off." That's an interesting parenting choice, having Isla in public school. We sent our boys to private school. We felt it was important to invest in their education. "Grant, darling, you look tired. Are you getting enough support at home? It must be exhausting working such long hours." Every comment was designed to highlight my inadequacies, to remind me that I wasn't quite measuring up to Constance's standards for the kind of wife her son deserved. And Grant, he never defended me. Not once. He'd sit there, sometimes nodding along, sometimes adding his own commentary. His brother Declan was just as bad. He'd make jokes about trophy wives, and then look pointedly at me and say, "No offense, Brielle." Or he'd talk about how his wife Fiona managed to work full-time and keep a perfect house, the implication being that I couldn't manage to do either successfully. I started dreading family gatherings. The week before each one, I'd feel this knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. I'd carefully choose my outfit, knowing Constance would find something to criticize. I'd rehearse responses to potential questions, trying to find answers that wouldn't give them ammunition. I'd brace myself for the evening ahead, knowing I'd leave feeling small and inadequate and wrong. And every time on the drive home, I'd try to talk to Grant about it. "Your mother was really harsh tonight. The comment about my weight, that really hurt." Or, "Did you notice how Declan kept making fun of my job? It would have meant a lot if you'd said something." Grant's response was always the same. "You're being too sensitive. They're just concerned about you. If you'd stop being so defensive, you'd see they're trying to help. Or worse, maybe if you didn't give them so much to criticize, they'd lay off." That one always stung the most. The suggestion that I deserved their cruelty because I wasn't good enough, that their treatment of me was somehow my fault. Isla started noticing around the time she turned 10. My sweet, observant daughter would watch these interactions with increasingly troubled eyes. She'd hold my hand tighter during family dinners, She'd lean into me when Grant made one of his cutting remarks. She'd ask me, in quiet moments, "Mom, why does Dad talk to you like that?" I didn't know how to answer her. How do you tell your child that you're trapped in a marriage where you're constantly being told you're not enough? How do you explain that the person who's supposed to love you most in the world treats you like you're an inconvenience, an embarrassment, a burden? So I'd deflect. Adults have complicated relationships, sweetie. Sometimes people express love in different ways. Even as I said it, I knew I was lying. What Grant was showing me wasn't love in any form. It was contempt. About a month before the dinner that changed everything, I tried one last time to get through to Grant. We were lying in bed, both scrolling through our phones in silence, which had become our nightly routine, and I put mine down and turned to face him. "Grant, I need you to hear me. When your family criticizes me and you say nothing, or worse, when you join in, it destroys me. It makes me feel like you agree with them, like you think I'm worthless too." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Jesus, Brielle, here we go again. You're always looking for something to be upset about. They're not criticizing you. They're trying to motivate you to be better." "Better how? What exactly am I doing wrong?" Now he looked at me, and his expression was cold. "You really want me to answer that?" My heart started pounding. "Yes, I do. Tell me what I'm doing so wrong that I deserve to be treated like this." He put his phone down with a sigh, like I was forcing him to do something incredibly tedious. "Fine. You work part-time but act like it's a full-time job. You've let yourself go physically. You're overly sensitive about everything, which makes it exhausting to interact with you. You don't make an effort with my family, and then you wonder why they're not warm to you. Should I continue?" I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Each criticism landed like a physical blow. This was my husband, the man who'd promised to love and honor me, and he was sitting in our bed systematically listing all the ways I was failing. "I do everything for this family," I said, my voice shaking. "I manage the house, take care of Isla, handle all the appointments and scheduling, do the shopping and cooking and cleaning, and still work to bring in income. I don't understand what more you want from me. I want a partner who doesn't constantly need validation, who doesn't turn everything into a drama, who can handle some honest feedback without falling apart." We didn't speak for the rest of the night. I went into the bathroom and cried as quietly as I could, and when I came back to bed, Grant was already asleep, or pretending to be. That was 3 weeks before Constance's dinner, 3 weeks before everything exploded. 3 weeks before I finally stopped making excuses and started seeing the truth. I was in a marriage with a man who didn't respect me, didn't value me, and maybe never had. I'd spent a decade making myself smaller, quieter, less demanding, trying to be the wife he wanted. And no matter how small I made myself, it was never enough. The Friday before the dinner, Isla found me crying in the kitchen. I'd been trying to hide it, wiping my tears quickly when I heard her footsteps. But she saw. Of course she saw. She always saw. "Mom?" Her voice was small and scared. "Why are you crying?" I couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't tell her that her father had spent the past decade slowly convincing me I was worthless. So I said, "Just a hard day, sweetie. I'm okay." She hugged me fiercely. This fierce little person who somehow saw through all my pretending. "You're the best mom in the world. You know that, right? You're the best person I know." I held her tight and made a silent promise. Something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this, couldn't keep teaching my daughter that this was what love looked like. But I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to break free from a decade of conditioning that told me I was the problem. When Constance called that weekend to summon us to dinner, I felt that familiar dread settle over me like a heavy blanket. Another evening of criticism and mockery. Another night of Grant either joining in or remaining silent while his family tore me down. I had no way of knowing that this dinner would be different, that this would be the night everything changed. That my daughter would have the courage I'd been lacking and would capture the truth I'd been too afraid to face. All I knew as I hung up the phone was that I was tired, bone deep, soul tired of being treated like I didn't matter. What I didn't know was that I was about to stop accepting it. Tuesday evening arrived with the weight of an impending storm. I'd spent the entire afternoon in a state of low-level panic, that familiar anxiety that came with every summons to Constance's house. I tried on 4 different outfits before settling on a navy blue dress that she'd once described as acceptable, which, coming from Constance, was practically a rave review. I paired it with simple jewelry and flats, nothing that could be criticized as too flashy or trying too hard. Isla came into my room as I was finishing my makeup. She was already dressed in a floral dress that her grandmother had bought her last Christmas, her dark hair brushed smooth. But her face was tight with worry, her eyes searching mine. "Do we have to go?" she asked quietly. I wanted so badly to say no, to tell her we could stay home, order pizza, watch movies, and forget that Grant's family existed. But I'd learned over the years that refusing Constance's invitations came with consequences. Days of Grant's silent treatment, lectures about my lack of family commitment, accusations that I was trying to isolate him from his mother. "It's just a few hours," I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "We'll get through it together, okay?" She nodded, but I saw her slip her phone into the small purse she was carrying. Isla never went anywhere without that phone. It was her comfort object, her connection to her friends, her escape when adult conversations got boring. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Grant was already downstairs, dressed in one of his expensive work suits, even though this was supposed to be a casual family dinner. He was on his phone typing furiously, barely acknowledging us as we came down the stairs. "Ready?" he asked without looking up. Not, "You look nice," or "How are you feeling?" Just a brusque, "Ready," like we were headed to a business meeting instead of his mother's house. The drive to Constance's house took 25 minutes through suburban streets, lined with increasingly large homes. With every mile, the houses got bigger, the lawns more manicured, the cars in the driveways more expensive. Constance lived in an exclusive neighborhood where the Homeowners Association had rules about everything from mailbox styles to acceptable holiday decorations. Grant drove in silence, still absorbed in his phone at every red light. Isla sat in the back seat, staring out the window, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap. None of us spoke. What was there to say? We all knew what awaited us. Constance's house came into view, a massive colonial with white columns and perfectly trimmed hedges. Every window glowed with warm light, and I could see through the front window into the formal dining room where the table was already set with her expensive china and crystal glasses. It looked like a scene from a magazine, beautiful, perfect, and completely devoid of warmth. Grant pulled into the circular driveway, behind Declan's BMW. We were the last to arrive, which would undoubtedly be noted and commented upon, even though we were 5 minutes early. The front door opened before we even reached it, and there was Constance, dressed in cream-colored slacks and a silk blouse, her silver hair styled in perfect waves, her makeup impeccable. She was 67, but looked at least 10 years younger, thanks to what I suspected was a combination of good genes, expensive skincare, and possibly a little cosmetic work she'd never admit to. "Grant," darling." She pulled him into a warm embrace, holding on for several seconds while completely ignoring Isla and me standing on the porch. When she finally released him, she turned to Isla with a tight smile. "Hello, Isabella. Stand up straight, dear. Posture is so important." Isla's name was Isla, not Isabella. But Constance insisted on using the full version, claiming it sounded more refined. It was just one of many small ways she tried to reshape my daughter into her image of what a proper young lady should be. Then Constance's eyes landed on me, and I watched her gaze travel from my face down to my shoes and back up again. It felt like being scanned by a judgmental robot programmed to detect flaws. "Brielle, that dress again? I've seen you wear it at least 3 times. Don't you have anything new?" My face flushed hot. "I like this dress. It's comfortable and—" Grant laughed, cutting me off. "You know Brielle, Mom. When she finds something she likes, she wears it into the ground. I keep telling her she needs to update her wardrobe." He said it with this joking tone, like we were all in on some amusing quirk of mine, but his words stung. I'd worn this dress specifically because Constance had approved of it before. Now, apparently, wearing it multiple times made me some kind of fashion disaster. We hadn't even made it past the entryway, and I already felt 2 inches tall. Inside, the house was exactly as I remembered, spotlessly clean, expertly decorated, and about as welcoming as a museum. Everything was in shades of cream, beige, and soft gray. There wasn't a single item out of place, not a magazine on a coffee table or a throw pillow at an angle. It was the kind of house where you were afraid to touch anything for fear of leaving fingerprints or disturbing the carefully arranged perfection. Declan and Fiona were already in the dining room. Declan looked like a younger version of Grant. Same build, same confident posture, same expensive suit. Fiona gave me a small, sympathetic smile. She was wearing a beautiful emerald green dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and her blonde hair was styled in loose curls. She looked gorgeous and miserable, which was her standard state at family gatherings. "Finally," Declan said with a grin. "We were about to start without you. Traffic that bad?" "We're 5 minutes early," I said quietly, but Declan just laughed. "Brielle and her technicalities. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late, right, Mom?" Constance nodded approvingly. "Punctuality is a sign of respect. But you're here now, so let's eat before everything gets cold." We took our assigned seats around the massive dining table. Grant sat at Constance's right hand, the position of honor. Declan sat at her left. Isla was placed next to me, with Fiona across from us. The table was set with enough silverware that I had to mentally review which fork to use for which course. Constance was a stickler for proper table manners. The pot roast sat in the center of the table, surrounded by roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes, dinner rolls, and a salad. Everything looked perfect, like a staged photo for a cookbook. Constance had always been an excellent cook, which was one more thing she held over me. My cooking was adequate, while hers was exceptional. Constance said a brief prayer. She always did, though I'd never seen her attend church. And then we began serving ourselves. For the first few minutes, conversation was safe. Constance asked Isla about school, and my daughter dutifully recounted her classes and her current science project. Grant and Declan talked about work, trading stories about difficult clients and office politics. I started to relax slightly, filling my plate with small portions of everything, hoping that maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight I could just eat my dinner in peace and get through the evening without incident. I should have known better. "So, Brielle," Constance began, setting down her fork with deliberate precision, Grant mentioned you've cut your hours back even further at work. Is that really financially wise in this economy? My hand froze halfway to my mouth. I set my fork down carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm actually working the same hours I've worked for the past 3 years, 25 hours a week. It gives me flexibility for Isla's schedule and— Flexibility, Constance interrupted, her voice dripping with disapproval. Interesting euphemism. In my day, mothers worked full-time and still managed to raise children properly. We didn't need special flexibility. I felt my jaw tighten. Every family's situation is different. This arrangement works well for us. Declan snorted into his wine glass. Come on, Brielle. 25 hours a week? That's barely a job. That's practically a hobby. My assistant works more hours than that. Grant laughed. Actually laughed. And something inside my chest cracked. He's not wrong, Viv. Medical billing isn't exactly brain surgery. It's pretty basic administrative work. I stared at him, genuinely shocked. We'd had this conversation before, privately, but he'd never dismissed my work so openly, so cruelly, in front of his family. I handle everything at home so you can work 60-hour weeks without worrying about anything, I said, hearing the tremor in my voice. The house, the cooking, Isla's school activities, all the appointments, the shopping, Every wife does that, Grant cut me off with a wave of his hand. It's called basic household management, Brielle. It's not like you're performing surgery. Mom did all of that while working full-time at the hospital. She never complained. Constance nodded, her face radiating approval for her son. Grant is absolutely right. I don't understand this generation's obsession with being praised for doing ordinary tasks. When I was raising my boys, I worked 40 hours a week, maintained an immaculate home, cooked every meal from scratch, hosted dinner parties regularly, and never once asked for a medal or special recognition. My face was burning. Under the table, I felt Isla's small hand find mine and squeeze tightly. I glanced at her and saw her face was tight with distress, her eyes shiny with unshed tears. She was watching her father tear me down, and she was powerless to stop it. The knowledge that she was witnessing this made everything 10 times worse. I'm not asking for a medal, I said quietly, forcing the words out through the tightness in my throat. I'm simply saying that I contribute to this family in multiple ways. My job may not be glamorous, but it provides income and insurance benefits, and managing a household is actual work. Is it, though? Grant leaned back in his chair, and there was something new in his expression, something cold and contemptuous that I'd never seen directed at me quite so openly before. Let's be really honest here, Brielle. You work part-time at a job that doesn't require much skill or education. You do housework that literally billions of women manage to do while also working full-time. And you're constantly complaining about how hard everything is, how overwhelmed you feel, how you need more support. The table had gone completely silent. Even Declan looked slightly uncomfortable now, though he was still smirking. Fiona was staring at her plate, like if she looked hard enough, she could disappear into it. I don't constantly complain, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Yes, you do, Grant said flatly. Everything is so difficult for you. Everything is so overwhelming. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is for me? I work all day to support this family, come home to a house that's not even that clean, mediocre dinner on a good night, and a wife who wants me to validate her for doing the bare minimum. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not catch my breath. The room felt like it was tilting, like the walls were closing in. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. And honestly, Grant continued, warming to his subject now that he had an attentive audience, Since we're being honest, you could put some effort into your appearance. I'm not asking you to look like a supermodel, but would it kill you to go to the gym once in a while? Watch what you eat? I see my colleagues with wives who actually take care of themselves, and then I come home to... He gestured vaguely at me, his lip curling slightly, and Declan burst out laughing. It's embarrassing, Brielle. You're embarrassing. The words hit me like a physical assault. I felt dizzy, disoriented, like I'd been drugged. Under the table, Isla's grip on my hand was so tight it hurt, but I held on like she was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. Jesus Christ, Grant, Declan said, still grinning. Tell her how you really feel. Grant smirked, clearly pleased with himself. I'm just tired of walking on eggshells. She needs to hear this. Maybe if someone had been honest with her years ago, she wouldn't be such a pathetic excuse for a wife now. Pathetic excuse for a wife? The words echoed in my head, bouncing around my skull like bullets. Constance was nodding slowly, like Grant had just delivered profound wisdom. Declan was barely containing his laughter. Fiona's face was bright red, but she said nothing, did nothing. And Grant was looking at me with such casual disdain, such open contempt, like I was something disgusting he'd discovered on the bottom of his shoe. I stood up so abruptly that my chair screeched loudly across the hardwood floor. Everyone jumped slightly at the sound. "Excuse me," I managed to say. "I need to use the restroom." I walked on legs that didn't feel connected to my body. Somehow I made it to the guest bathroom down the hall and locked the door behind me. I braced my hands on the marble countertop and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was splotchy and red. My eyes were bright with tears I absolutely refused to let fall. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Behind me, I could hear muffled voices from the dining room. Grant's voice, loud and cheerful, then laughter. They were laughing. My husband had just destroyed me in front of his entire family, called me pathetic and embarrassing, and they were laughing about it. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to compose myself, trying to figure out how I was going to walk back to that table and sit down and finish dinner, like everything was fine. Like my entire world hadn't just shattered into a million pieces. Because here's what I finally understood, alone in that bathroom. My husband didn't love me. Maybe he never had. And his family's cruelty wasn't something he tolerated despite his discomfort. It was something he encouraged, enjoyed, participated in fully. I was completely, utterly alone in my marriage. When I finally forced myself to return to the dining room, they'd moved on to discussing Grant's recent promotion. He was laughing, animated, soaking up his mother's praise. No one acknowledged my return. No one asked if I was okay. Isla immediately grabbed my hand again under the table. Her other hand was in her lap, and when I glanced down, I saw the edge of her phone, partially hidden beneath her napkin, the screen still glowing. Our eyes met. She gave me the tiniest nod. She'd recorded it. She'd recorded everything. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me, because I might have been willing to accept this treatment for myself, to convince myself I deserved it, to keep the peace at any cost. But I would not let my daughter grow up thinking this was normal. I would not let her believe that love looked like this. Something had to change, and as I sat through the rest of that nightmare dinner, my daughter's hand clasped in mine, and the proof of my husband's cruelty captured on her phone, I felt the first stirrings of something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Pure, righteous, clarifying anger. Grant thought he'd won. He thought he'd finally put me in my place completely, with witnesses to validate his view of me as inadequate and pathetic. What he'd actually done was push me too far, and he had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. I lay in bed next to Grant, listening to him breathe deeply and evenly, completely at peace, like he hadn't just eviscerated his wife in front of his entire family a few hours earlier. The darkness pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating, while my mind raced through every moment of that dinner on an endless, torturous loop. Pathetic excuse for a wife, embarrassing, draining. Each word was a knife that kept stabbing me over and over again. But worse than the words themselves was the realization of what they meant. This wasn't a one-time outburst. This wasn't Grant having a bad day and taking it out on me. This was what he actually thought of me. This was how he actually saw me. And his family agreed with him. They'd sat there nodding, laughing, enjoying the spectacle of my humiliation, like it was dinner theater provided for their entertainment. Around 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep entirely. I slipped out of bed as quietly as possible. Not that it mattered, Grant was dead to the world, and padded downstairs in my pajamas. The house was dark and silent. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. I'd barely settled onto the living room couch when I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Isla appeared in the doorway, her silhouette small in the darkness. She was still in her pajamas, too, her hair messy from tossing and turning, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She didn't say anything, just crossed the room and sat down next to me, close enough that our shoulders touched. For a long moment, we just sat there in the dark, both of us staring at nothing, processing what had happened. Finally, Isla placed her phone on the coffee table between us. The screen lit up, casting a blue glow across both our faces. "I recorded it, Mom," she whispered. Her voice was shaking, but there was steel underneath it. Everything Dad said at dinner. "I started recording when Grandma made that first comment about your dress because I had this feeling, this pit in my stomach, that it was going to get bad. But I never thought," her voice cracked, "I never thought Dad would say those things to you. I never thought he could be that cruel." I stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. Part of me wanted to grab it and delete the recording immediately, erase the proof of my humiliation, pretend it never happened. But another part of me, a part that was tired and angry and done with pretending, desperately wanted to press play, wanted to see it from the outside, wanted to know if it was really as bad as it felt in the moment. "Sweetie, you didn't need to—" "Yes, I did," Isla interrupted, her voice fierce now. "Mom, listen to me. I'm 12 years old, I'm not stupid, and I'm not a baby. I've been watching this happen for years. I've watched Dad make fun of you, put you down, ignore you. I've watched Grandma be mean to you, and Uncle Declan mock you. And you just take it. You smile and take it, and pretend everything is fine." Tears were streaming down her face now, catching the light from the phone screen. "But it's not fine, Mom. None of this is fine. And it makes me so angry because you're the best person I know. You're kind and smart and funny, and you do everything for us, and they treat you like you're nothing, like you don't matter. And I'm sick of watching it happen." I pulled her into my arms and we both cried, ugly, gasping sobs that we'd both been holding in for too long. My baby girl, my fierce, brave daughter, had been carrying this weight, watching her mother be destroyed and feeling powerless to stop it. The guilt of that realization was crushing. "I don't know what to do with this recording," I admitted when we'd both calmed down a little. "I don't know what it changes." Isla pulled back and looked at me with eyes that were far too old for 12. "It changes everything, Mom, because now you have proof. You always tell me that when someone says something mean, sometimes people don't believe you because they didn't hear it themselves. Well, now you have proof of what Dad really thinks of you, and you can't pretend anymore that it's okay. You can't keep telling yourself you're imagining it or being too sensitive. She was right. God help me. My 12-year-old daughter was absolutely right. I'd spent years doubting myself, questioning my own perceptions, accepting Grant's version of reality where I was the problem. But this recording, this was objective truth. This was evidence that I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. This was proof that my husband had stood up in front of his family and called me pathetic, embarrassing, a burden. Can I watch it? I asked quietly. Will you stay with me while I watch it? Isla nodded and handed me the phone. She curled up against my side, and I pressed play. Watching it was somehow worse than living through it the first time. Removed from the immediate panic and humiliation of the moment, I could see everything with painful clarity. I could see the enjoyment on Grant's face as he warmed to his subject, the way his eyes lit up as he got more and more cruel. I could see Constance nodding approvingly, like he was finally speaking truths that needed to be said. I could see Declan's delighted grin. Like watching someone get torn apart was the best entertainment he'd had in weeks. But worse than any of that was seeing myself. The way my shoulders curved inward with each insult, like I was trying to physically protect myself from his words. The way my face crumpled for just a second before I managed to force it back into a neutral expression. The way I made myself smaller and smaller, shrinking into my chair, trying to disappear. And then Grant's voice, crystal clear through Isla's phone recording. Maybe if someone had been honest with her years ago, she wouldn't be such a pathetic excuse for a wife now. I watched myself stand up and leave the table, my movements stiff and mechanical. The camera shifted slightly. Isla must have adjusted her phone, and I could hear their voices more clearly now. Constance. Well, that was long overdue. Sometimes the truth hurts. Declan. Dude, you destroyed her. That was brutal. Grant laughing. She needed to hear it. I've been walking on eggshells for 10 years. Maybe now she'll actually make some changes. More laughter. Casual, comfortable laughter. Like they'd just watched a comedy show instead of a man destroying his wife's self-worth. The recording continued for another minute or so before Isla must have stopped it. The screen went dark, and I sat there in my silent living room, my daughter pressed against my side, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. For 10 years, I doubted myself, questioned whether I was too sensitive, whether I was the problem, whether I deserved how they treated me. I'd twisted myself into knots trying to be better, trying to be enough, trying to earn Grant's respect and approval. But watching that video, seeing it from the outside, I finally understood the truth with brutal, undeniable clarity. I wasn't the problem. I had never been the problem. My husband was cruel. His family was cruel. And I had been letting them break me piece by piece, year after year, until there was almost nothing left of the woman I used to be. Mom? Isla's voice was small and scared. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I could delete the recording, pretend it never happened, go back to the status quo of accepting whatever treatment Grant and his family dished out. That was the safe choice, the comfortable choice, the choice I'd been making for a decade. Or I could do something different, something scary, something that would change everything. I need to make some calls tomorrow, I said slowly, and I need you to send me this recording. Can you do that? Isla nodded immediately and started tapping on her phone. A moment later, my phone buzzed with an incoming message, the video file, evidence. We sat together on the couch until the sky started turning gray with approaching dawn. Isla eventually dozed off against my shoulder, but I stayed wide awake, my mind spinning with plans and possibilities and terror at what I was about to do. When the sun finally rose, I gently woke Isla and sent her back to bed. She had school in a few hours. Then I went upstairs, showered, and got dressed with meticulous care. I needed to be put together for what was coming. I needed to look like someone who had their act together, even though I felt like I was falling apart inside. Grant was still asleep when I left the house at 7:30. I'd called in sick to work, something I never did, and I had a full day of tasks ahead of me. First stop, a divorce attorney. Just typing the words into my phone's search engine made my hands shake. Divorce, the word I'd been avoiding even thinking about for years. But I typed it, found a well-reviewed attorney in the next town over, and called the moment they opened at 8. "I need a consultation," I told the receptionist, my voice surprisingly steady. "As soon as possible. Today, if you have anything available." There was a pause, some clicking of keys. "We had a cancellation at 11. Can you make that?" "Yes, I'll be there." I gave her my information and hung up, then sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot where I'd pulled over to make the call, trying to process what I'd just done. I'd made an appointment with a divorce attorney. This was real now. This was actually happening. Next, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Maeve. We'd grown distant over the course of my marriage. Grant had never liked her, always said she was too opinionated, too interfering, too quick to judge him. Looking back now, I could see that he'd been systematically isolating me from anyone who might tell me I deserved better. Maeve answered on the second ring. "Brielle, is everything okay?" The concern in her voice told me exactly how long it had been since I'd called her. We'd become the kind of sisters who only talked on holidays and birthdays, when once we'd talked every day. "No," I said, and my voice broke. "Everything is not okay. Can I talk to you? Do you have time? For you? Always. Tell me everything." And I did. Sitting in my car in that parking lot, I told my sister everything. Years of small cruelties and big humiliations compressed into a 30-minute phone call. I told her about the dinner, about how Grant had called me pathetic and embarrassing in front of his family. I told her about the recording. When I finished, there was silence on the line for a long moment. Then Maeve's voice came through, tight with barely contained rage. "Send me that recording right now. I don't know if... Brielle, send me that recording immediately. You need people to see this. You need documentation. Send it to me and send it to yourself from Isla's phone to your email. Back it up to cloud storage. Create a paper trail. This is evidence of emotional abuse, and you need to protect it." Evidence of emotional abuse. Hearing my sister name it like that, plainly, without hedging, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I wasn't being too sensitive. I wasn't overreacting. What I'd experienced was abuse. I did what Maeve said. I sent the recording to her, forwarded it to my personal email, backed it up to 3 different cloud storage services. Suddenly, it wasn't just one file on one phone. It was real. It was documented. It was evidence. "What are you going to do?" Maeve asked. "I have an appointment with a divorce attorney at 11. Another silence then. "Good. That's good, Brie. I'm so proud of you. Do you need me to come with you? I can leave work right now." "No, I need to do this myself. But thank you. Just knowing you're in my corner again, it means everything." "I never left your corner," Maeve said fiercely. "I've been waiting for you to see what I've been seeing for years. I love you. Call me after your appointment." The attorney's office was in a professional building downtown. Patricia Morrison, the name on the door read. I sat in the waiting room for 10 minutes, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. before a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s called me back. Patricia's office was lined with law books and had diplomas from impressive schools on the walls. She gestured for me to sit in a comfortable chair across from her desk and looked at me with kind but assessing eyes. "Tell me why you're here," she said simply. And I did. I told her everything, the years of belittling comments, the public humiliations, the way Grant and his family treated me, and then I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording. Patricia's expression didn't change as she watched, but I saw her jaw tighten. When it ended, she was quiet for a long moment, her fingers steepled under her chin. "That's damning," she finally said. "Absolutely damning. This recording establishes a clear pattern of emotional abuse and verbal degradation. It could be very relevant in divorce proceedings, particularly regarding custody arrangements and potentially alimony." "I'm not ready to file for divorce," I said quickly, even though I'd just spent the morning preparing to do exactly that. "I don't know if I'm ready." Patricia leaned forward, her expression gentle. "That's okay. You don't have to decide anything today. But I want you to start documenting everything from this point forward, every interaction, every insult, every incident. Keep a journal with dates and times, save text messages and emails, and keep that recording safe, multiple copies in multiple places." She walked me through the basics of divorce law in our state, what I could expect in terms of timeline and process, what evidence would be helpful. By the time I left her office an hour later, I felt simultaneously terrified and empowered. I had information. I had options. I had a plan. The rest of the week passed in a strange fog. Grant barely spoke to me, which was actually a relief. He seemed to think the matter was settled, that he'd finally put me in my place and we'd just move forward with me properly chastened and compliant. He had no idea that everything had changed. On Monday afternoon, Constance called. I saw her name on my phone screen and felt that familiar dread start to rise. But this time, something was different. This time, I had a choice. "I'm having the family over again this Friday evening," she announced without preamble. 6 o'clock. I expect everyone there on time. Something inside me snapped. Something that had been bending and bending for 10 years finally broke, but not in a bad way, in a liberating way. "No," I said quietly. "Excuse me." Constance's voice went sharp with surprise and displeasure. I said, "No, we won't be there." "It's not your decision to make, Brielle. Grant will want to be there, and Isla. Grant can do whatever he wants, but Isla and I will not be attending." There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. I'd never said no to Constance before, not once in 10 years of family dinners and holiday gatherings and command performances. "Well," she said icily, "I'll be speaking to my son about this. Your attitude is unacceptable." "You do that," I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking, but not with fear, with adrenaline, with the rush of finally standing up for myself. I just told Constance no, and the world hadn't ended. The sky hadn't fallen. I'd simply set a boundary and enforced it. When Grant came home that evening, he was furious. Constance had obviously called him immediately. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded, dropping his briefcase by the door with a loud thud. "My mother calls to invite us to dinner, and you tell her no. Who do you think you are?" I looked at him calmly from where I was sitting on the couch. "I'm your wife, and I'm done being disrespected by your family." "Oh, here we go again with the victim complex." "I have something to show you," I interrupted. I pulled out my phone, pulled up the video, and pressed play. Grant's face as he watched himself at that dinner was fascinating. I saw confusion first. What was he looking at? then recognition as he realized what Isla had done. Then something that might have been shame flickered across his features before his expression hardened into anger. "You had our daughter recording us? At a private family dinner? You called me a pathetic excuse for a wife in front of your entire family," I said evenly. "And you're worried about privacy?" That was taken completely out of context. There is no context that makes what you said acceptable, Grant. There is no excuse for that level of cruelty. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before, like I was a stranger in his house instead of the wife he'd been systematically breaking down for a decade. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I was stressed, having a bad day, and I took it out on you. It won't happen again." But his voice was flat, mechanical. He wasn't sorry. He was just sorry I had proof. "I want you to understand that things are going to change," I said. "I'm done accepting this treatment. From you, from your mother, from your brother. If you can't treat me with basic respect, then we have a serious problem." Grant's jaw clenched. "Are you threatening me? Because if you're thinking about leaving—" "I'm telling you the truth," I interrupted. "How you respond to that truth is up to you." We stood there in our kitchen, this man I'd loved for 10 years, and I realized I didn't know him at all. Or worse, maybe I'd always known him and had just refused to see it clearly. "If you do anything with that recording," Grant said coldly, "if you show it to anyone or use it against me in any way, you should know it will destroy this family. It will destroy my career. Is that what you want?" "You destroyed this family," I said quietly. "The moment you decided I was worth less than everyone else. The moment you chose cruelty over kindness. You did this, Grant, not me." He grabbed his keys and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood in the kitchen, shaking but resolute. The next morning I made a decision. I sent the recording to 3 people: Maeve, my attorney Patricia, and Fiona, Declan's wife. I included a simple message for Fiona. "I thought you should see this, in case he treats you the same way. You're not alone." Within an hour, Fiona called me crying. "Brielle, I'm so sorry. I should have said something at dinner. I should have stood up for you. I was just so afraid that if I did, Declan would—" She stopped, but I understood. I understood perfectly. "I know what it's like," she said quietly. "I know exactly what it's like. I have recordings too, hours of them, of Declan saying things just as bad as what Grant said to you." We talked for 2 hours, 2 women who'd been suffering in silence, finally finding allies in each other. And by the end of that conversation, I knew what I needed to do. I wasn't going to just leave quietly. I wasn't going to protect Grant's reputation while he destroyed mine. I was going to make sure everyone saw who he really was, and I was going to do it in a way he never saw coming. Friday arrived like Judgment Day, the same day as Constance's command performance dinner that I'd refused to attend. I'd spent the entire week preparing for what I was about to do, my stomach twisted in constant knots, but my resolve growing stronger with each passing day. Grant had tried multiple tactics to get me to change my mind about the dinner. First, he'd used false pleasantness, suggesting that maybe I'd overreacted and we should just move past it. When that didn't work, he'd tried guilt, saying I was destroying his relationship with his family. Finally, he'd resorted to threats, veiled comments about how my attitude was making him reconsider our marriage, how I was being unreasonable and difficult. I let him talk. I didn't argue. I just repeated calmly that Isla and I would not be attending. At 5:30, as Grant was getting ready to leave for his mother's house, I walked into the bedroom where he was adjusting his tie in the mirror. I held out a plain manila envelope. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "Just open it when you get there," I said, my voice steady despite the way my heart was hammering against my ribs. He stared at me for a long moment, trying to read my expression, searching for clues about what I was planning, but I'd learned over 10 years of marriage how to hide what I was feeling. I kept my face neutral, calm, giving nothing away. Finally, he shrugged, took the envelope and shoved it into his jacket pocket. "Whatever this is, Brielle, I hope you're not planning to make things worse. You've already embarrassed yourself enough." He left without kissing me goodbye, without even looking back. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, Isla came downstairs. She'd been waiting in her room, knowing what was about to happen. We'd planned this together over the past few days, my 12-year-old daughter and I, plotting the end of my silence. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" she asked, her eyes wide and worried. "Once you do this, you can't take it back." "I'm sure," I said, and I was. For the first time in years, I was absolutely certain about something. We sat together on the couch, Isla pressed against my side, my laptop open on the coffee table in front of us. At exactly 6 o'clock, when I knew they'd all be sitting down to dinner at Constance's pristine table, I posted the video. Not just anywhere, everywhere. I'd created a new social media account earlier that week, one with no connection to my personal profiles. I uploaded the 13-minute recording with a simple, direct caption. "My husband and his family want to know why I'm suddenly being difficult. This is why. This is what I've been living with for 10 years. This is what emotional abuse looks like. No more silence. No more protecting people who hurt me." Then I started tagging Grant's company, where he'd always been so concerned about his professional reputation, Constance's volunteer organizations, where she liked to present herself as a pillar of the community and a paragon of family values, Declan's real estate firm, and the golf club where he networked constantly. I tagged them all. I posted it to every platform I could find: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. I made it public, searchable, shareable. Then I posted something else, a compilation I'd spent days creating with Isla's help. We'd gone through years of photos and videos on my phone, pulling every moment where Grant had rolled his eyes at me, cut me off mid-sentence, made dismissive gestures, or said something cruel that I'd captured without realizing what I was documenting. Set to silence, with just simple captions noting the dates and contexts, the pattern was undeniable and heartbreaking. Years of contempt, documented in real time. Years of a woman slowly disappearing while her husband encouraged it. The final slide was just text. "If someone treats you like this, it's not love. You deserve better. I deserve better. And I'm finally choosing better." My phone started buzzing within 5 minutes. Notifications flooding in, shares, comments, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. I turned the sound off but left the screen visible so I could watch the numbers climb. At 6:23, there was aggressive pounding on the front door. Grant had left his mother's dinner and raced home. I'd expected this. I'd prepared for this. Isla immediately stood up, her phone already out and recording. "Just in case," she whispered, and I nodded. My brave, smart daughter, always thinking ahead. I opened the door calmly. Grant looked wild. His face was flushed red, his tie was loosened, his eyes were furious and panicked at the same time. "Take it down," he demanded, not even stepping inside, just standing on the porch broadcasting his anger to the whole neighborhood. "Take it down right now, Brielle. I'm not asking." "No," I said simply. "Brielle, I'm serious. My boss has already called me. My mother is absolutely hysterical. Do you have any idea what you've done? You're destroying my reputation, my career, my entire life. I'm showing people who you really are. I interrupted, my voice calm and steady. That's all. If your reputation is destroyed by the truth, then maybe you should have treated me better. This is insane. You've lost your damn mind. Actually, I think I finally found it again. He tried to push past me into the house, his face contorted with rage, but I held my ground. That's when he saw Isla at the top of the stairs, her phone held up high, clearly recording everything. He froze. Oh, that's just great. Now you've turned my own daughter against me? You're using her as your little accomplice? You did that yourself, Dad, Isla said, her voice shaking but strong. I'm recording this in case you try to hurt Mom. I'm recording this so there's proof of how you're acting right now. The look on Grant's face, shock, rage, fear, disbelief, all cycling through in rapid succession, would have been almost comical if the situation weren't so serious. I would never hurt her, he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. You've been hurting her for years, Isla replied, and I'd never been more proud of her. We're just done letting you get away with it. Grant looked between us, and I watched the exact moment he realized he'd lost control, not just of this situation, but of his carefully maintained image, of the narrative he'd been crafting about our marriage, of everything. My lawyer is going to destroy you, he said, his voice dropping to something cold and threatening. You had no right to record a private conversation and post it publicly. That's illegal in some states. You could face charges, and when I'm done with you, you'll be lucky to get anything in the divorce. Actually, I said, pulling out the notes I'd made during my consultation with Patricia. I checked with my attorney. In this state, only one party needs to consent to a recording. Isla was present at the dinner. She consented. It's perfectly legal. And as for posting it publicly, everything on that recording is true, so you'd have a very difficult time claiming defamation. Truth is an absolute defense. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles jumping. You've been planning this. You've been planning to destroy me. I've been planning to save myself, I corrected. There's a difference. He pulled out his own phone, and I watched his face go pale as he scrolled. The video was everywhere. In the 30 minutes since I'd posted it, it had been shared hundreds of times. Thousands of people were watching my husband call me pathetic and embarrassing. Thousands of people were seeing what I'd lived with. There are already thousands of comments, he said, his voice hollow. Thousands of shares. The company HR department sent an email demanding I come in first thing Monday morning for a meeting. Jesus Christ, Brielle. What have you done? I stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions, I said. I stopped caring more about your reputation than my own dignity. He looked up at me, and for just a second, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of what was happening to his carefully constructed life. This will ruin me. Then maybe you shouldn't have called your wife a pathetic embarrassment at your mother's dinner table, I said quietly. Maybe you shouldn't have spent 10 years systematically destroying my self-worth. Maybe you should have been a better person. We stood there in the doorway of the house we'd bought together, the life we'd built together crumbling around us, and I felt nothing but a strange, profound calm. This was the explosion I'd been avoiding for years. This was the confrontation I'd been too afraid to force. This was the moment everything changed, and I'd finally stopped being afraid. I want you to leave, I said. Pack a bag and go stay somewhere else. A hotel, your mother's house, your brother's place. I don't care, but you need to leave tonight. This is my house too, and I'm asking you to leave it. If you refuse, I'll call the police and show them the recording and explain that I don't feel safe with you here. Your choice." Grant stared at me like I was a stranger, like the compliant, quiet woman he'd married had been replaced by someone he didn't recognize. In a way, I suppose she had been. He left, went upstairs, threw some clothes in a duffel bag, and walked out without another word. The door closing behind him was one of the most satisfying sounds I'd ever heard. Idla and I stood in the suddenly quiet house, and then she burst into tears and threw herself into my arms. We sank down onto the floor right there in the entryway, holding each other and crying. But this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief, of release, of freedom. Over the next few hours, the fallout was catastrophic and swift. Grant's company put him on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation into his conduct. Apparently, treating your wife like garbage doesn't play well when you're in a client-facing role, and the company is trying to maintain a progressive, respectful image. Constance's volunteer organization started receiving complaints. Multiple people reached out to the board she sat on, questioning whether someone who could sit at a dinner table and laugh while her son verbally abused his wife should be in leadership positions. Several organizations asked her to step down. Declan found himself suddenly uninvited from networking events and facing his own reckoning after Fiona posted her own statement, revealing years of similar treatment and hinting at recordings of her own. But the response that meant the most to me came from the thousands of women who commented on the video, sharing their own experiences with emotional abuse. Women who'd been told they were too sensitive. Women who'd been mocked by their partners and in-laws. Women who'd spent years doubting themselves, thinking they were the problem. "Thank you for being brave enough to share this," one woman wrote. "I've been living with this for 15 years and thought I was losing my mind. Seeing your video helped me realize I'm not crazy." Another, "My husband does the exact same thing, says cruel things in front of his family, and then accuses me of being too sensitive when I'm hurt. You just gave me the courage to stop accepting it." And another, "I'm a divorce attorney, and I see this pattern all the time. What you experienced is textbook emotional abuse. Thank you for putting a spotlight on it." My private pain had become a collective reckoning. The video had struck a nerve, exposing a pattern that too many women recognized from their own lives. But the most surprising response came Tuesday afternoon, when I received an email from Grant's company. Not from HR, but from 3 different women who worked there, women I'd never met. The email was simple and devastating. "Your video gave us the courage to file formal complaints. Grant has been treating women at work the same way he treated you, dismissive, condescending, belittling. We've reported him multiple times over the years, but he brought in too much money, so nothing was ever done. Until now. Until his treatment of women became too public to ignore. He was fired this morning. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth." I sat in my kitchen reading that email over and over, tears streaming down my face. My speaking up hadn't just changed my life. It had changed theirs, too. It had created consequences for Grant that years of quiet complaints never could. That evening, my phone rang. It was Fiona. "I left him," she said without preamble. "I left Declan. Your video, watching what Grant did to you, seeing you stand up for yourself, it made me realize I couldn't keep living like this. I filed for divorce this morning." We talked for an hour, making plans to support each other through what was coming. 2 women who'd been suffering in silence, now standing together. The video stayed online. I got multiple requests to take it down, from Grant's attorney, from Constance, through various intermediaries, from people who thought I should move on and be the bigger person and not air my dirty laundry in public. I refused every single request, not out of spite or revenge, but because silence protects abusers, because other women needed to see that speaking up was possible, because the truth deserved to exist in the light, not hidden away to protect someone's image. Grant tried multiple legal tactics to get it removed: cease and desist letters, threats of lawsuits, claims of privacy violations. But every attorney he consulted told him the same thing Patricia had told me. The recording was legal, the content was true, and he had no grounds to force its removal. The truth was out there now, documented and undeniable, and no amount of money or legal maneuvering could put it back in the box. 3 days after the video went public, I received a handwritten letter from someone unexpected. Grant's father, Robert, who divorced Constance when Grant was in college. I'd only met him a handful of times over the years. "Dear Brielle," it read, "I saw the video. I want you to know that I believe you, and I'm sorry I wasn't around to see what was happening. I lived with Constance's cruelty for 20 years before I found the courage to leave. She raised our sons to believe that treating their partners with contempt was normal, even admirable. I failed to protect them from that, and I failed to teach them better. Thank you for protecting yourself in Isla. You did what I should have helped you do years ago." I cried reading that letter, understanding finally where Grant's cruelty had come from, understanding that this was a generational pattern passed down like a toxic inheritance, and understanding that by speaking up, by refusing to accept it, I was breaking that pattern for my daughter. Isla would grow up knowing that love doesn't look like contempt, that partners should build each other up, not tear each other down, that it's never too late to choose yourself. That Friday night, 1 week after I'd posted the video, Isla and I ordered pizza and watched movies curled up on the couch together. No family dinner at Constance's house, no walking on eggshells, no bracing for the next cruel comment. Just peace, real, genuine peace that comes from finally telling the truth. "Mom," Isla said during a quiet moment, "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of us," I replied, pulling her closer. "We did this together. Because we had." My brave, fierce daughter had given me the evidence I needed to finally see clearly, and together we'd chosen truth over comfort, dignity over silence, freedom over a facade of perfection. The recording that Grant never saw coming wasn't just evidence for a divorce. It was proof that I existed, that my pain mattered, that my truth deserved to be heard. And 1 week later, we were still here. Bruised, but not broken, scared but not defeated, free in ways I'd never known I needed until I finally gave myself permission to fight for it. The climax wasn't just the moment I posted the video. It was the moment I stopped caring more about Grant's comfort than my own worth. It was the moment I decided that protecting an abuser's reputation was less important than protecting myself and my daughter. It was the moment I finally chose me. And everything that came after, the fallout, the consequences, the reckoning, was just the world catching up to a truth I'd been living with for 10 years. Grant thought he could humiliate me with impunity that night at his mother's dinner table. He thought he could put me in my place once and for all, with his family there to witness and approve. What he actually did was give me the proof I needed to escape. He gave me evidence that I wasn't crazy, wasn't too sensitive, wasn't imagining things. He gave me the truth, recorded and undeniable. And the truth was the one thing his carefully constructed lies couldn't survive. 3 months have passed since that Friday night when I stopped being silent. 3 months since I pressed post and watched my carefully buried truth spread across the internet like wildfire. 3 months since I chose myself over a marriage that was slowly killing me from the inside out. The divorce is proceeding, ugly and contentious, exactly as I expected it would be. Grant is fighting me on everything: custody, assets, alimony, even things that don't matter, like who gets the coffee maker we got as a wedding gift. His attorney sends threatening letters weekly, trying to intimidate me into accepting less than I deserve. But Patricia, my attorney, handles each one with calm professionalism, reminding me that his anger is just proof that he's lost control of the narrative. The video evidence has been crucial. In mediation sessions, when Grant tries to paint himself as the reasonable party and me as unstable or vindictive, Patricia simply references the recording. It's hard to claim you're a respectful partner when there's a 13-minute video of you calling your wife pathetic and embarrassing in front of your family. The mediator's face when she first watched it told me everything I needed to know about how this would go. Grant lost his job at the finance firm. Not because of the video directly. They couldn't fire him for his personal life, but because 3 women who worked with him filed formal harassment complaints after my video gave them courage to speak up. Apparently, his contempt for women wasn't limited to his marriage. He'd been creating a hostile work environment for years, making condescending comments, talking over female colleagues in meetings, dismissing their ideas and contributions. The company had ignored it when it was quiet complaints that could be swept under the rug, but once it became public and tied to viral video evidence of how he treated women, they couldn't ignore it anymore. He's been unemployed for 2 months now. Part of me feels guilty about that. 10 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight, but then I remember his voice saying, "Pathetic excuse for a wife," and the guilt evaporates. He did this to himself. I simply stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. Constance has become a pariah in her social circles. The volunteer organizations she was so proud of being part of asked her to step down from leadership positions. Turns out that laughing while your son verbally abuses his wife doesn't align with the values of organizations dedicated to helping families and supporting women. She's tried to reach out to me several times through intermediaries, never apologizing but suggesting we should move past this unpleasantness for the sake of the family. I've ignored every attempt. There is no moving past this. There is no rug big enough to sweep this under. She sat at that dinner table and smiled while her son destroyed me, and I will never forget that. More importantly, I will never again put myself or Isla in a position where we have to endure her cruelty. Declan is in intensive marriage counseling with Fiona, who found her own voice after years of silence. She filed for separation 2 weeks after I posted my video, and apparently seeing how close he came to losing everything shocked Declan into actually examining his behavior. I don't know if their marriage will survive. That's between them, but Fiona texts me regularly to say that my courage gave her permission to demand better. That means more to me than she knows. Isla is in therapy, and it's helping. We both are. Actually, individual sessions for each of us, and occasional joint sessions to process what she witnessed growing up and how we move forward from here. Her therapist says Isla shows remarkable emotional intelligence and resilience, but that she was carrying too much worry about me for a child her age. She'd been trying to protect me for years, and now she's learning that it's not her job to protect her mother from her father. That realization has been both liberating and heartbreaking for her. She still records things sometimes. It's become a habit, but her therapist says that's okay. It makes her feel safe, like she has proof if anyone tries to gaslight her about what's happening. Given what she witnessed in her father's treatment of me, that need for documentation makes perfect sense. The relationship between Isla and Grant is strained. He gets visitation every other weekend, as ordered by the court, but the easy affection they used to have is gone. She's polite but distant with him, and she told me she doesn't trust him anymore. That breaks my heart for both of them, but I also know that trust has to be earned back. Grant destroyed it himself through his actions, and it's his responsibility to rebuild it if he can. I'm back to working full-time now, 40 hours a week at the medical billing office. My boss was incredibly understanding when I explained my situation. Apparently, she'd been in a similar marriage years ago and recognized the signs. She gave me a raise and additional responsibilities, telling me she'd always known I was capable of more, but had noticed how small I'd made myself over the years. Having someone validate that I'm competent and valuable has been healing in ways I didn't expect. The money is still tight. Supporting a household on one income is hard, and Grant is fighting tooth and nail about temporary support, but I'm managing. I've had to make adjustments, cut back on expenses, learn to budget more carefully. But every dollar I earn is mine. Every decision I make about money is mine. That independence, even with the financial stress it brings, is worth more than the comfortable prison I was living in before. I've reconnected with my sister Maeve, and our relationship is stronger now than it's been in years. She comes over every Sunday for dinner, and she and Isla have bonded over their shared protectiveness of me. Maeve keeps reminding me that I'm not alone, that I never have to face Grant or his family without backup. Having my sister back in my life feels like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost. The video is still online, still being shared occasionally when discussions about emotional abuse or toxic families come up on social media. Every few weeks, I get a message from someone, usually a woman, but sometimes a man, telling me that watching my video helped them recognize abuse in their own relationship, that it gave them permission to stop accepting unacceptable treatment, that it saved them. Those messages are what keep me from having regrets about posting it. Because yes, it blew up my life. Yes, it was painful and scary, and there were consequences I didn't fully anticipate, but it also helped people. It created change. It exposed a pattern that thrives in silence and dies in the light. I still have moments of doubt and fear, late nights when I lie awake wondering if I did the right thing, if I could have handled it differently, if I'm really capable of building a new life at 38 years old. Moments when I see an older couple holding hands and wonder if I'll ever have that kind of partnership, or if Grant broke something in me that can't be fixed. But then morning comes, and Isla and I have breakfast together without walking on eggshells, and I remember why I did this. I remember what I was teaching my daughter by staying silent. I remember the woman I was becoming, small, scared, convinced I deserved contempt. And I remember the woman I'm becoming now, someone who knows her worth, who sets boundaries, who refuses to accept less than she deserves. Looking back over the past 10 years, I can see exactly how it happened. The slow erosion of my self-worth, the gradual acceptance of unacceptable treatment, the belief that love meant enduring whatever was thrown at me. I can see how I taught my daughter, without meaning to, that women should be small and quiet and grateful for whatever scraps of affection they receive. But I can also see how it ended, with a 12-year-old girl who loved her mother enough to document the truth, and a woman who finally loved herself enough to believe she deserved better. The recording lasted 13 minutes and 47 seconds. but the impact will last the rest of my life. It gave me my voice back. It gave me my dignity back. It gave me proof that I wasn't crazy or too sensitive or imagining things. It gave me the courage to choose myself. I've learned so much these past 3 months. I've learned that speaking your truth is terrifying but necessary. That protecting an abuser's reputation is never more important than protecting yourself. That other people's cruelty is about them, not about you. That you can spend years making yourself smaller, and it will never be enough for someone who wants you to disappear. I've learned that emotional abuse is insidious because it makes you doubt your own reality. That recording gave me back my reality, undeniable and documented. No one could tell me I was being too sensitive when thousands of people watched that video and recognized it for what it was: abuse. I've learned that children see more than we think they do, and that staying in a toxic situation for the kids actually teaches them that toxicity is normal, that the best thing I could do for Isla wasn't to keep her family intact at any cost. It was to show her that she's worth fighting for, that no one gets to treat her poorly, that she has permission to demand better. I've learned that women are incredibly strong and that we survive things we never thought we could survive. That there's a whole community of women who've been through similar experiences, and that sharing our stories helps all of us heal. That silence protects abusers, but truth sets us free. Most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to choose yourself. At 38, after 10 years of marriage, with a daughter and a mortgage, and a life that looks stable from the outside, I made a choice. I chose truth over comfort. I chose dignity over peace. I chose myself over a man who'd spent a decade convincing me I wasn't worth choosing. For anyone out there reading this, anyone living with someone who makes you feel small, who mocks you publicly, who convinces you that you're too sensitive or demanding or difficult, please hear this. You are not the problem. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining things. You deserve respect. You deserve kindness. You deserve a partner who builds you up instead of tearing you down. And if they won't give you that respect, if they can't treat you with basic human dignity, then maybe it's time to find the courage to respect yourself enough to walk away. I know it's terrifying. I know it feels impossible. I know you've probably spent years being told that you're the problem, that you need to try harder, that you're not enough. But you are enough. You've always been enough. You were enough before you met them, and you'll be enough after you leave them. Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish your worth. It reveals their limitations, not yours. That Friday night dinner at Constance's house was meant to put me in my place, to remind me of my inadequacies, to ensure I stayed compliant and quiet. Instead, it became the catalyst for my freedom. It became the moment I finally saw clearly what I'd been living with. It became the beginning of my new life. The recordings my husband never saw coming weren't just evidence for a divorce. They were proof that I exist, that my pain matters, that my truth deserves to be heard. They were the key that unlocked the cage I'd been living in for a decade. And 3 months later, I'm still here. The marriage is ending, but I'm beginning again. I'm rebuilding my life with intention this time, surrounding myself with people who celebrate me instead of diminishing me. I'm teaching my daughter what healthy relationships look like by refusing to model toxic ones anymore. I'm learning to take up space instead of making myself smaller. I'm learning that my voice matters, that my boundaries matter, that I matter. Grant thought he was teaching me a lesson that night at his mother's dinner table. He thought he was putting me in my place, establishing the hierarchy, making sure I understood my role in his life. What he actually did was push me so far that I finally broke, not in the way he intended, but in a way that set me free. He broke the chains that were holding me in place. He shattered the illusion that this was normal, that this was what love looked like, that this was all I deserved. He pushed me past my breaking point, and on the other side of that breaking, I found myself again. The woman I used to be, confident, strong, certain of her worth, had been buried under 10 years of contempt and criticism. But she wasn't gone. She was just waiting for permission to come back. That 13-minute recording gave me permission. Isla's courage gave me permission. The thousands of women who shared their own stories gave me permission. But ultimately, I gave myself permission. Permission to stop accepting the unacceptable. Permission to believe I deserved better. Permission to choose myself, even when it was scary, even when it was hard, even when the whole world felt like it was crumbling around me. 3 months ago, I pressed post on a video that exposed my private pain to the world. Today, I'm still dealing with the consequences of that choice. The divorce proceedings, the financial stress, the uncertainty about the future. But I'm also free. Free from walking on eggshells. Free from measuring every word before I speak. Free from making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's ego. Free from teaching my daughter that this is what she should accept from a partner, and that freedom, as messy and complicated and difficult as it is worth everything. So this is my conclusion, my final lesson from 3 months of upheaval and rebuilding. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. Your worth is not determined by how someone else treats you, and it is never, ever too late to choose yourself. The recordings my husband never saw coming saved my life. Not literally. Grant never physically hurt me, but they saved the person I was becoming, the shell of a woman who'd forgotten she deserved respect and kindness and love. They gave me back myself, and that's the most precious gift I've ever received. The permission to exist fully, to take up space, to demand better, to refuse to settle for crumbs when I deserve the whole feast. 3 months ago, my marriage ended, but my life, my real, authentic, fully myself life, finally began. And I've never been more grateful for an ending, because it gave me the space for a new beginning. A beginning where I write my own story instead of playing a supporting role in someone else's. A beginning where my daughter grows up knowing her mother chose dignity over dysfunction. A beginning where I finally remember what I forgot somewhere along the way. I am enough. I have always been enough. And I deserve better than I was accepting. That's the truth my husband never wanted me to know. That's the truth his dinner table cruelty was designed to obscure. That's the truth that 13-minute recording finally allowed me to see clearly. And now that I know it, no one can take it away from me again. This is my story. This is my truth. This is my new beginning. And I'm just getting started.